From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. James, how are you today? I'm looking forward to a fun conversation.
I'm doing very well, Steve, and I'm looking forward to this conversation as well. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. We just passed our 200th episode, so that's real exciting, and we're on the road to the next 100, and appreciate our community, and just excited that we're going strong. So we have another interesting topic on tap for today, and I think that it's going to be a fun conversation, and hopefully our audience will be able to relate to it because I think it's something that really can spark some ideas and a lot of debate likely, but also very relatable. So what we came up with was that if you are somebody, and I don't know how you wouldn't be, that uses apps or software as a service or any cloud application, you realize that those uh, products can change without notice. And I'll just share from a personal experience, not to talk about anything in specific, but I opened an app recently and it just operated very differently than the last time I had opened it, and it's something that I use often, and it was pretty jarring, and I said, "Whoa, it like what happened here?" And I had to really figure out what are the changes, how do I make it operate similarly to what I'm used to, or how do I adapt to the way it operates now? And I'm still, after using it for several times, fumbling around with it, and it just made me think. What application does that have, or what impact is that going to have in the AV industry? And you know, the world of AV has always been about consistency and making sure that anyone could go into any system and feel comfortable. But when things change without notice, one, how would you get away with it? But more importantly, how are we in the AV industry going to adapt to it, knowing that this is part of our world?
That is the $1 million question. Because I don't think anyone has a good answer to it. Because we see it comes from the IT world, the software as a service, cloud. Everyone's running thing. I mean, just recently, and I'll give you my own story too. Like I had a appointment booking app um, that I use all the time. Default settings change. The people who were booking things couldn't make changes, and I expected them to, because I didn't realize the default settings change, and I had to go and update those things. And at first I'm looking and be like, well, why didn't these people follow the directions that were sent? And then I realized, no, they did follow the direction. It was they couldn't do it because something changed. Um, so the IT world does that a lot. They do roll things out, and I think I'm not against it. And I think what needs to be done is clear communication. And how that is done is not always good. Like I feel where I'm working now, we have clear communication because sometimes you have to update things for whatever reason, security. Like I said, the permission change on mine makes sense once I sat down and got through the initial, like, why is this way? And then I'm like, well, makes sense from the security saying that you're not gonna want that. So it's just being clear communication about that and saying this is the impact. And I think that's where some of these things are missing, especially as the software as a service, because they're so removed from the true users that they don't know what the true impact is gonna be, um, because they cast a wide net, you know, whatever app, I don't know, they're trying to hit as many users as they need, and they can build, but people are all different. Your taste is different than my taste, which is different than our listeners' taste. But so how do you build an app for all of them, make changes without, kind of frustrating some of them? And you have to have that clear communication and kind of explain why you're doing something in a certain way. Like I think that's really what it boils down to is the clear communication. It's like we're making this change to our let's bring it back to AV and programming. We're making a change to our touch panel here because of this. This is the impact. You used to hit the green go button. Now it's a yellow power button. And I'm using weird example, but you explain it. Be like, we are maybe our your research showed that your users respond better to the yellow power button instead of the green go. Um, Makes sense if that's the case. So again, it make the change, be clear communication on it before you just roll it out.
Yeah, I like that, and I know that we've certainly talked about many times sandboxing and being able to control updates and firmware changes. It's the funny thing is, to your point, there must be some motivation behind them making this change. There, it must have come from somewhere, and I would imagine, I would hope that it came from some feedback from users, or it came from some type of true data saying that this would improve an experience, and that's why we're doing it. But the fact that it happens without notice and you can't control it certainly can be impactful. And I know that what we've talked about in our previous conversations is the fact that updates need to be planned, and updates need to be prepared for and tested and understood, and then rolled out in a responsible manner. And while these some of these examples are minor, they're also significant in some regard, because I think some people are able to adapt to them better than others. And I can only imagine that in a big scale, somebody's getting some phone calls when something doesn't work the way it did the day before, and that's probably
Yeah.
not a good thing.
No, and that's the thing. It's like we always sit there and say an example, like car manufacturers. If look at it and they sent an update and all of a suddenly the ignition button is now on the left-hand side where it's always been on the right-hand side, it's going through your users for a loop. Um, or the windshield wipers buttons are different and especially windshield wipers. I'm going to use that as a wild example here because that's a feature people usually don't use daily unless you're in a rainy area or a snowy area. So like in my area, very dry. We get very little rain. But when it rains, I need to make sure my wipers are working. But if all of a sudden an update came and they changed the way the buttons, now I'm flustered as I'm trying to drive down the highway to get my wipers on because it's not something I do daily.
Yeah, I find the same in a rental car. You get into a
Yeah.
car and you have to either turn your lights on or turn on your wipers, and you need them, and all of a sudden they weren't where you were expected because you don't drive that car. But it's a good example. Um,
Yes. A good friend of mine, I don't know if any of our listeners know him, but you know, he used to be the host of Ed Tech on AV Nation, Bill O'Donnell, who always said he remembers vividly an experience he had with a rental car and not in the good way.
yeah,
So
absolutely. Well, there, certainly too, there's been some updates made to certain products in the residential side that again, we won't go into names recently, that really threw a lot of people off because the they rolled out an update that wasn't fully vetted and tested, and it couldn't be rolled back, and that very much damaged the way the operation of the system worked and caused a lot of people a lot of stress. So that I'm just trying to think through this in terms of, how is the AV industry supposed to be prepare themselves for these things that are inevitably going to happen? And another example too that I like to bring up is that if we base our standards, or we're building around a third party product and saying that we want our custom user interface to emulate that, and that gets changed or operates differently, it can really blow up a standard that you've invested in and developed and cause a lot of commotion and a lot of extra work and cost. So it's something to certainly be aware of, because we have no control over what these third party interfaces do and how they get changed.
I think that's where us AV folks got to come in and be the SME. And IT is very, I talked about ITIL a little bit. They have their change management process, all that stuff. When it's done well, you have those considerations. You have the clear communication, you have a fallback plan, you have a deployment plan. Like all that stuff is well documented and sent out in a good change management system. Unfortunately, we don't always have great change management. And as an AV person, we need to really go back to what you and I have talked about, Steve, of knowing our systems inside and out, especially as programmers, because we need to know if I'm making this change, what kind of impact it'll have. If that impact does happen, how can I roll back? Is there a rollback? Have I tested this in a sandbox environment? I mean, prime example, I was talking to my infrastructure director the other day, and we're like, hey, we're seeing an improvement with this one change in our switches firmware. We want to roll it out. I'm like, great. What's our impact? Okay. What's our rollback plan? Okay, let me find time in the building schedule that there's nothing going on so we can roll out, test, and if fail, roll back with very little impact. That takes a lot of planning. That takes a lot of thought and saying, "Hey, what if this goes wrong?" And or, "Hey, what about this?" And so you have to get the stakeholders in the room talking about. It may just be you and the network director. It might be you and your programming team. It might be you and a user who uses the system. But get them in the room, talk about it, and be like, "Hey, this is our plan. And then this is how we hope it's going to go. If it doesn't, here how we're going to address any issues that might come up." Like having that all ready to go saves a lot of energy in when the stuff hits the fan.
Yeah.
For I mean, because we all know when things hit the fan, stress goes up, critical thinking kind of slips back because we're pressured. We have to be like, oh no, what am I going to do? That's never a good thought. But if you go, "Oh, no, this happened, but we planned for it. Here's plan B. Roll it out. Oh, wait, plan B didn't work out. Let's try this out." Like going through those steps and going through those exercises. And that's only doable over time. Like, for example, your first time doing it, you're going to mess up. You're going to miss things. You're going to be like, okay, I'm going to roll this out and this is going to be my backup plan. And you know what? You didn't think about that. Your backup plan may fail too. Um, or you didn't test it right. You're going to make mistakes, but then you adjust that and you add it and be like, okay, next time I need to vet first. So let's vet it here. Okay, now we're good. And you build on it. So don't think it'd be like, oh, I have to be 100% perfect first time. We all would love that, but unfortunately, technology is not that way.
One something that comes to mind in you going through this is the fact that we need to possibly vet the partners that we work with to let them understand that this is something that we need to be aware of, and that this is the impact it will have on us. And to avoid finger pointing and avoid flare-ups, we have to figure out a way that we can work together so that we know when something is going to be updated. Maybe we can't prevent it, but at least we're aware of it. And we also need to be able to have some type of control mechanism, like you mentioned, or be able to be ready for it. Because it's I can I don't know if it bothered me, I could only imagine it will be very concerning to what tends to be a change-averse community in the AV world, where just making the slightest change or making or having to move away from something that somebody got comfortable with could really cause a lot of problems, even if it isn't the best solution.
Yes. And everyone, if you've been following me long enough, you know that's one thing I toot about the AV industry is we dig our feet in and we say we're not moving, we're not changing. And then we get upset when the world changes around us and people are doing things without going through us because, we were digging our feet in and saying, nope, this is how you do it. This is the way you're doing it. And then the world to change. Um, we're gonna see that. We're gonna see the world change. We're gonna see technology change. I know one of the things in AV and the AM. Um, One of the questions that recently was if you had go back in time and bring back a piece of technology, what would it be? And my thought was if that technology was key, like very good, reliable, the latest, it wouldn't be dead. We wouldn't have reverted away from it and moved to something else. I mean, yeah, I was a fan of VGA, but high def came out. VGA can't do high def. I'm like, it's not gonna bring it. Like, so to say, oh yeah, let's go back to our analog days and run VGA cables everywhere. That's just to me, it's like, no, I don't like the exercise because we moved away from it for a reason. Especially in the AV world, as you and I just alleviate, AV doesn't change much. So for us to make a change, it means we made it for a reason. And probably a reason because either everyone else changed and then we finally said, okay, we're gonna change, or we like, yeah, DB9 is not the way to go. We can get this done with a USB cable much quicker and a lot easier. I don't have to spend hours soldering. Great. Make our lives easier. But I just think that's what it is. We gotta be adaptable. Doesn't mean, we go wild, wild west and agree with everything and be like, okay, bring all the changes. We have to do it methodically and think it through and be the SME, be that middle person to say, yes, this change makes sense. No, this change doesn't make sense. Okay, I understand the need for this change, but here's the impact. What can we do?
Yeah, think that that's probably a good way for us to wrap this one. But I agree with you that we need to be forward thinking, and that if we're going to maintain our relevance and not let the world pass us by, we have to be on our toes. So it's a really good point. I'm curious to hear what our audience thinks and share any experiences you've had of this nature. I can't imagine that we're the only ones that have experienced it, or we're alone in this, but I think it's a real conversation to have, because I believe it's something that we're going to be facing more and more. So I'm curious how people are dealing with it and adapting, or what their thoughts are. So please reach out to us and let us know what you think. James, let people know how to reach you, keep the conversation going, and know what you're up to.
Best way, Steve, is get a hold of me on probably X AV underscore James King on LinkedIn at Ask the AV or Ask the Programmer Community. Um, I'm on Blue Sky. I'm not very active there, but I'm on there. Again, Google me, you'll find me.
Wonderful. And you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media, and my company, Control Concepts. We're a supporter of this podcast. So we help programmers address some of the product integration needs that they have, as well as provide building blocks that help add functionality to your systems. So you can find more about that at controlconcepts.net. And as James said, we are really trying to build a community, keep this conversation going, and keep the topics top of mind that we feel that programmers want to hear more about, or what we want to educate the community, the AV community, about with regard to programming. So please help us do that by sharing your favorite episode, commenting, joining our LinkedIn group, and just promoting the this podcast would be very valuable and very much appreciated. We can be found on YouTube in the video version and audio version on your favorite podcast player. And we really like to hear from you. If you'd like to be a guest or you have a topic or a question that you want to share, please reach out and do so. And until next time, this has been Ask the Programmer.